Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli. Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli. Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire, non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. A big round of applause just to warm up our speakers and to welcome us all. Just by way of introduction, I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'm very happy because we're going to talk about the future, which concerns us all. We're talking about happiness, and we're talking about us, people, us as people, as a group who can contribute to our future. I don't know if you agree with me, but when we talk about philosophical categories like a future intelligence, a person, we can immediately understand each other. If I'm going to say future, I think we all agree on the fact that the future is something that has not occurred yet. The only thing dividing us is that maybe some people believe that we can have an impact on the future and therefore we can contribute to creating, developing the future. Some others are somewhat more negative and believe that this is not possible. Where do we stand? I think that we are on the side of the people, of those who want to build up the future together. I'm not going to speak much because since there's many different speakers, there's many different thinkers, there's a large number of speakers here, so I will just give you some insights and questions, and then I'll give the floor to the speakers. We are going to talk about categories of words, and you can see that from that tree behind me. These words might seem to be empty in a provocative way, but we have to fill them up. So be very practical to make people understand what we are talking about, or what the contents that we want to put in these words. There's a project which is called Plan B, on which you've been working. This work has led to these results, and this work is still underway. It's called the Plan B because we don't like a Plan A. Maybe Plan A has not provided the right answers to society, the world, and the future. So, Professor Giaccardi, I'm not going through the list of people because you will read the names of the people while they will be speaking. They are all thinkers who have started to work on this project. Professor Giaccardi, please help me understand the roots of this initiative. What was the need behind it? Why has each and every one of you contributed to this initiative, launching this project? Thank you, and welcome to all of you. This is a tree of words, as you can see. I will start with two sentences to provide an answer to this question. The first one is by Henry De Luca. A tree is alive just like a people, and not just as a person. So we are a promoting group. It's a small bunch of people that have decided to promote something, meeting a common need. And we are a people, a bunch of people walking together side by side, supporting the weakest ones, helping one another at difficult times, full of dangers, but also full of opportunities. And the second sentence is Alda Merini, my favorite poet, saying, "Tree calling the life, keeping me the wise root of my change." A tree has a root, and the change that has no roots is like something that has no legs to walk. So we want to look at the future starting from common roots. A common root that we share with different nuances and with different thinkings, but that is common to us all. And the tree is a link between the earth and the sky, between the past, what is behind us, and the future, what is coming after that, up high. So this is a very nice image which stands as a symbol for what we want to do. It's more important to think about what we want to do than to think about who we are. We are a promoting group. We're not founders. We don't have an identity. We have a common root. We have common words which are not empty. One of our tasks is to go beyond the symbolic poverty of our times, where we need words as weapons in order to neutralize other people. As someone said, we need to go beyond the slaughter of the enemy, as in at our times words are used to fight against enemies, whereas we want to focus on the symbols of the words. We are a people, we are connected, and nature is a link, nature is connection, life is a connection. So the symbol provides contents to this link, and these are very important words. Our task is to go beyond the triviality of words and provide new contents to these words, because these words are common to us all. They don't have a political side. They belong to the human dimension. Hence, we have to provide new contents to them to recreate links that have faded away. So it's a political, cultural, and epistemological dimension. We all work in different sectors. We all see things from a different perspectives. As Plato would say, the mind cannot be opened if you don't open your heart. So we have the passion in common for this country. This is the homepage of our website, and the website is an interactive place. Regenerating the symbolic dimension means inviting people to contribute to the construction of the new cultural horizon based on our thinking and our actions. This is what we're missing right now. And we are launching a process. We are not the protagonists of this process. We are not the owners of this process, but this process is made available to all of you, and we invite all of you to contribute. If a sustainable world can exist, the sustainable world has to be focused on everyone's contribution. Thank you, Professor. So you have given the context of the project. You have presented the tenets of the project. If we look at the tree, before coming up to the leaves and the words, we have the roots. And I can see that there's a typical flow starting from the bottom, going up high to the top. Is that the right direction, bottom up? Professor Collicelli, yes. This is the way it is, and I can say that after CESE has made a lot of reports on integrated development between the social and economic sectors, we had the feeling that there were different insights and the potentials that were unheeded. So on the one hand, we were frustrated. On the other, we wanted to look for something to tap on this potential. I've been working with ASVIS, Alliance for Sustainable Development, and sustainability is a very common topic. But we needed to create a network of public and private partners. Until the network was not created, there were no results. Now, a bottom-up action has been promoted. And now we start to increase awareness. And a constitution has also changed. Last year, 2 articles of the constitution were changed, promoting sustainability and showing sustainability in terms of intergenerational justice and balance among all categories of society. Then let's remember that we're coming out of the pandemic. Everyone has suffered. The elderly and the youth have particularly suffered, and we are coming out of the pandemic thinking that we can develop a new process of transformational resilience. So we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, we want to renew things. So today's initiative, as has already been explained, is a way forward, a new way forward, getting us all in common in order to tap on these resources. Anna Maria Ortese wrote that Italy is rich in resources. It's like a waterfall that needs to be channeled. That needs to be channeled into a common river. This is what we want to do based on the words that you can see here in the tree. I want to remind 3 vital words: sustainability, solidarity, and generability. And also, symphony and score are 2 very important words, because those 2 words explain this initiative very well. I can see many young people here in the audience and among our speakers. An initiative just based on individuals cannot work. if it is just based on the nail, it doesn't work. We need knots. We need knots because we have to establish relations bottom up. So hopefully this day can be a starting point to increase the number of associations and the number of people that will join our initiative. That is going to be focused on words, and that will be creating a platform that everyone will be able to join. So this is the first opportunity where this project is being presented. So this is the first time, and this is just a starting point. Professor Becchetti, and correct me if I'm wrong. Is that a call to action or not? Yes, it is. It's an attempt to connect an action which is already underway and a new action. We want to make some existing things emerge in the country. We have traveled a lot. All of us have traveled a lot over these years. And we have seen that there are extraordinary things in Italy, like good practices, work in jail, employment guidance, and enterprises can put together many different dimensions. So, but why can that not be seen? Why this doesn't come out in the political debate? So we want to combine thinking with the different existing initiatives in Italy in order to contribute to the Italian culture. So we want to combine the two things. This is the meaning of this initiative. Hence, the birth of a community of social innovation with different links, making also political proposals. In that context, I want to ask you, do we need to have a political stance, either on the right or on the left, in order to implement this initiative? Or do we need to get on the side with the Catholic side or not? What is your stance? What is your position? It's difficult for people to understand because the idea is always to understand on what political side we are. No, this is totally different thing. This is why we don't call it a party, but a sort of movement. A great economist, Otelling, explained why companies are based in different places. He explained there's a beach with all the people, and he showed through a model that usually ice cream shops tend to be placed in a beach in order to sell as much as possible. This model has been used to explain politics. And ice cream shops have become parties. And this model was also explained some examples of parties that were put in the center in order to get people from the right and from the left. But we are passive. We are the consumers as a people, and the only thing that we can do is to choose where we want to buy the ice cream. The revolution is that there is a place on the beach, which is wonderful, where water is clean, where there's a wonderful landscape, and we want to be there. We want to be based there. And this is where ice cream shops have to come in order to sell us the ice cream. So this is why we call this not a party, but a movement. This is the country we want to have. And this is what we can do in order to fight against today's dilemmas, today's problems. The more we can convince the public opinion and the parties, the more we will be successful. This is an offer to all political parties. This is an initiative to all political parties. They can join the movement. Then I will come back to you with a question on happiness, because this project aims at happiness, which seems to be an enormous thing, but we're talking about happiness here. And we can plan happiness. This is what we try to do. Professor Venturi, let's talk about innovation. When talking about innovation, this concept is often linked to a mechanical process, the result of something which has to do with technology and machines. I'm oversimplifying here. Usually, we think about the fact that what is innovative has to do with a PC that is faster than anything else, a result that can be achieved by introducing a new technological process. And we always forget the human dimension, the human factor and the social factor. Does social innovation exist or not? Social innovation does exist. It does not pertain to the Holy Spirit, but it is a method to do things. And it should be the method adopted by politics. Even better, the social innovation is oriented to the common good, is aimed at the common good. Please be very practical. So just make us understand and be very practical. So this project focuses on social innovation. Innovation. What is innovation? Innovation is not an answer to the emergency, but it is the natural attitude that should be educated, because today people are against risks. People are afraid of risks. So uncertainty has to be tackled through innovation. Innovation is the method to look at the future. Then let's look at the term social. This is not an innovation promoted by the good. This is an innovation promoted by society. So this initiative showcases an existing innovation, which is already underway. Words show innovation that is already existing at a local level. Inequalities, welfare, employment, labor. Every problem leads us to something else. We cannot just act on consequences, but we have to act on the roots, on the causes. Labor, for example. Labor is not just related to fair salaries, fair wages. Welfare. Welfare is not just related to the fact of providing new services, but services have to be redesigned and implemented according to the local dimension. Talking about the youth, in the most remote areas of the country, 65% of the country, where many people are living, 67% of young people wish to stay there. So the point is that these young people can be an engine for growth, for development. So this is related to a demand for innovation, which is not just digital innovation, but which is also related to the fact of making all these entities, all these youth become protagonists. So this platform is a great opportunity. It is a political initiative, because politics is not just made by parties, but by society as a whole. Don Milani would say the word IKEA, I'm taking care of this initiative. So innovation is care. Also, social innovation has a characteristic which we often forget and that parties forget, political parties forget. All these needs cannot be met just by the state and the market. Without the contribution of the community, citizens, networks, and the societies as a whole, a solution cannot be found. Hence, this movement should not just have a program, but is based on something which is already existing to continue. So we needed to start from existing things. You said a word I really like, which is care. Care is the most beautiful word, I think. And we can use the word care in all different dimensions, the personal dimension, professional dimension, the social dimension, the economic dimension. Mr. Riolo, how do we have to correct the old model? The old model is based on the Homo economicus, where the profit is the Northern Star. We have to reverse this trend, and we have to come up with a new model where one with one is not two, but is more than two. What is this model about? The challenge is a major one. I come from Francesco Economy. I'm a member of Francesco Economy. This is a movement that became an international process. Many young people have joined this movement to give a soul back to the economy, an economy that is killing. If the earth is boiling, and if inequalities are increasing, there are two possible ways. One is to continue the way we've always done, homo econominus and homo hominis lupus. Hence, we can continue pursuing the spirit of capitalism, or there is an alternative, the quest for a new spirit, which can be summarized in a word that is not there in the tree. There are 12 words in the tree, but more words can be added. One of these words is brotherhood. This word is brotherhood. When we talk about relations, the word brotherhood changes it's a spirit. If you live brotherhood, if you embrace brotherhood, so this movement is a wonderful example of how to connect, how to link existing movements. This year is the 30th anniversary of the death of Don Bello, talking about hope. Can I also say something? Coming here to the meeting, we can see hundreds and hundreds of young people who are kind, the volunteers who spend their resources and time to stay here. So this is a sign of hope. So sometimes I'm discouraged by reading the newspapers, and then I come here and I see a young world that is moving and that is enthusiastic, and that fills me with hope. This is absolutely true. It is also important to talk about, to tell about this type of experience, because in the public debate, people are very polarized. We forget about the problem, so you have to to have a stance, to have a position, and then you get depressed. But actually, as you were saying, rightly saying, there are many experiences, many examples of young people who are ready to take risks and to risk their own lives every day by making important choices at a personal and professional level to change this world. So young people are taking their risks, but it's the adults that don't take risks. But the key is to give young people the possibility to take risks. So I think that the adults should take their own risks too. Following up to what ASVIS is doing, in an article of a few days ago, Professor Giovannini was saying that today the educational problem on environmental and social sustainability does not concern the youth because the youth are ready. They are looking for a meaning and they don't want to accept compromises. So today, young people and teachers, professors can study sustainability, but the problem is with the adults who have already trained, who trained in a system where these topics were not trendy, but today they count a lot more than the youth.
So when we think to do something good, we ask ourselves, is that enough? In your opinion, is it enough to do something good, or do you need to do that properly in order to actually achieve a result? Because I think to this purpose, skills are fundamental. What do you think about that? Well, you need to do that properly, and I would like to mention what Giampaolo just said, and a couple of words on which we shall focus are skills and ideal and thoughts. And that's what Pope Francis says, to give back a soul to economy, which is my field, actually. So the complex aspect of the issues we are dealing with, also in the university with the research, we are continuously required to know deeper into details what actually happens. And we should, however, be focused on the fact that behind figures and data, there are always stories of real people. And that's what we need to keep in mind. And I'm thinking to the research that I carry out with one of the promoters of Plan B, focusing on the educational field, which is one of our words in our manifesto. And we focused on the evaluation, the assessment of the quality of the education, the skills and knowledges of teachers in an Italian province. So we went there on site with our research group, and we considered all the aspects involved, so the province, the directors of the schools, the teachers, and we directly went to meet students as well in order to provide solutions, to consider the methods that they are implementing. And that's the way we need to focus in order to create relationships as well. So it's been a very hard work, even more complex than the one we thought at the beginning. Well, this is linked to the topic of common good as well, because, for example, when I'm thinking to water, for example, water is something that we cannot replace, and there is no synonym. There's nothing that can replace water in our life. So it's important to be aware of the fact that these goods can finish. And you, as youth, you are aware of that more than senior people. Of course, yes, but it's important to know that we are collaborating with many people from different ages, and I really hope that we'll be able to go ahead with this path and these projects in this way. We mentioned several times the word labor, work, which is the effort we'll have and the challenge we'll have to face in the future. We all know that our society is getting older and older very quickly, where we are also dealing with the issue that we may become the first country where there will be one worker per every retired person, and we are not that far from that situation, from that condition. Just a few weeks ago, I was reading on the New York Times an article which was stating that Italy may be risking to disappear. So my question is, how can we face this challenge in a country where 65% of children starting school and will do a work which doesn't exist yet? So almost 7 children out of 10 will have to deal with this situation. Well, first of all, let me say that we are dealing with a plan B because the plan A is not working. We are moving from one crisis to the other, and we keep on repeating the same kind of mistakes from a social, political, and economic point of view. So these plan A is useful and even dangerous in order to interpret the challenges, to face the challenges of the labor market. This is fundamental. And let's say that in Italy we have a labor market which is extremely it is featured by huge inequalities. The OECD is stating that we are trapped in the low-skilled equilibrium, so at the bottom level in terms of challenge of skills, and we are doing that in a period where labor is at the core of several transitions, so demographic transition, environmental transition, and digital transition. So if within these transitions, which are of course playing a key role in the labor market, if we keep on making the same mistakes, of course it's going to be hard to succeed. So I'm talking about, we are talking about scores here. We mentioned the word score because we are trying to force a different reading of what is happening. And if things keep on working or not working in this way in terms of redistribution or fighting against the inequalities, maybe some step forwards shall be made. We need to give a new meaning to the words. We need to provide a new breathing to these ideas. Today, the crisis of our political, social democracy is a crisis of participation, and jobs and the labor market is one of the contexts in which this crisis is more evident. So we believe the country shall make an effort. We have a labor market which is extremely polarized. There is not only the poor labor, which is growing, however, but there is all a part on the top, which is the high-skilled labor. And these two different worlds are becoming bigger and bigger, and there is a gap between these two worlds, which is becoming bigger as well. So what we can do in order to redistribute the opportunities to people shall be reviewed and renewed. We need to strengthen the right for education. This was part of the contract for mechanical workers signed in 2016, but unfortunately it's not been developed enough. And then the technology, the reference technology with which each one of us is working is continuously changing. And if we don't want this transformation to lead us to further mistakes, and if we don't want that to become fear, we need to strengthen the possibility that people have to proactively take part in the innovation within these processes. That's why we need to review and reform the education and the training as well, because education should adapt to the person and not the other way around. Because the paradox here is that with this so-kind customized education, we are still, however, proposing and implementing the same methods of education and training, which is the same for everybody. So how can we implement the so-called reskilling for people that are age over than 60 years old, and ask them to go back to school and start studying again? We need to go the other way around. We need to set new goals, and our goal is to manage these processes, so making sure to support people and not let them alone. I would like to quote one of the statements of President Mattarella, who will be here in Rimini tomorrow. And, well, change is a word which is kind of frightening because it seems to be a concept which changes everything, of course. And Mattarella always says that the change shall be managed, it shall be led. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. So here the key aspect can happen through school as well with Professor Vittadini. We'll talk about that later on. So it's interesting to understand what is correctly working in our school, if this is the situation, if this is the direction we want to go through. Is our school able to actually face this challenge for the future? That's my question. Well, I leave the optimist approach to George. I would like to mention what is not working, actually. So the rate of students leaving school is growing all over Italy. In some regions, we had this data that the so-called Invalsi test is providing weird results, dramatic results. This means we are kind of playing with the future of our children, of this generation. We need to change the teaching method. This is an incredible year, or it should have been that, because that's the 100th anniversary of the birth of Don Milani and the 100th anniversary of the 150 hours for the right to the study signed by the workers' agreement. And I'm saying that because those 150 hours meant 1 million workers, men and women, to be obliged to take part in school, to attend schools, at least until high school. So it's been a very important achievement. Let's talk about happiness now, Professor Giaccardi. And the question is, if the future, the fate of our society could be kind of linked to the destiny of the fact of being Christian. It's a very challenging question. Well, before answering, I would like to start from the meaning of and the roots of the word happiness, which comes also from the same roots of the word fertility. I think that our imagination is based on radical individualism, so basically not recognizing the links that allow us to live, because the tree itself can live just because of the roots it has in the environment. And this happens for every living being, especially for the human being as well. So we cannot look for happiness from an individual point of view. Happiness means recognizing a relationship. And someone said that this is the gratitude, thanks to the gratitude that we can feel responsible. We are not talking about something abstract here. We're talking about something which belongs to us and which plays as a spark in order to take care of these relationships without which we cannot be happy. So talking about happiness, we need to talk about relationships. And talking about relationships, we need to talk about brotherhood and about traditions, Christian traditions, which is a pillar because we are all brothers, because we are sons. And this is a way of reading this context, this situation. Of course, there can be other interpretations, but what we would like with our project to recognize is the importance of the relationship and the need to take care of this dimension of the relationship, which has been fragmented, which has been denied through these logics of opposition, of lack of friendship as well. The topic of this meeting is friendship. So there is no happiness without this context. Nobody can be happy alone, and nobody can be free alone. Well, what does it mean for you to be saved? Well, to save means something entire. So when we say healthy, when we talk about being healthy, it's not enough to be not dead, but we need to involve all our dimensions, the spiritual one, the physical one, the intellectual one. All our dimensions shall be involved in their complete aspect, allow us to be saved. So happiness that can save us allows us to feed and to grow all the dimensions that are present within ourselves. So, as you mentioned earlier, it's fundamental to take care of someone. When we say to take care of relationships, well, this care is something extremely radical, extremely important. That's the way of living in the world, recognizing that this relationship represents ourselves. We are not making the relationship, but it is the relationship itself that allow us to live. So this care is a way of approaching the world starting from this central condition. And again, focusing on the roots of the world, care comes from a word which means to see. And we can say that it means see the reality in a different way, so imagining different paths and different ways from the ones we are going through. So we believe that this project, which is just at the very beginning of its life, we believe it may grow as long as it will involve people and as long as each one of these people will contribute, because we need to overcome the idea of taking the more that we can. The freedom here is to bring something, and the contribution of each one of us is unique, and it's not possible to repeat it. And this will lead us to this idea of the common good in which each one of us plays a role. Professor Collicelli, we're now approaching a higher level of this topic, and I really hope our audience is appreciating what we are saying here. So, talking about taking care. So taking care of a person, this action starts from the moment in which a person is born till its death. So we're coming from a dramatic moment of this bound that left consequences on all youth, all young people, but we are more aware now in terms of where this system of the care shall look and focus. And thinking about the health system in this case, I'm saying something which I believe is not new to anybody. It's very challenging and very hard, and it's enough to read every newspaper. It's very hard to find doctors nowadays, and I'm sure Bentivogli will agree with me. There are many doctors that decide to leave the hospitals because it's impossible to work so hard beyond the acceptable hours, both for their health and also for the health of the people they shall take care of. And these doctors are leaving and escaping where they can find better salaries sometimes. So the question is, coming out of the pandemic experience, what did we learn from a system that today more than ever we discover being so fragile, with some lacks that are not the responsibility of one government or the other, but shall be approached with a cross-cutting approach. So what kind of mistake did we make, and what can we do? Well, thank you for this question, because this allows me to focus on some aspects which play an important role in our Plan B project. For sure, the pandemic showed many different problems and situations. The first one is that the national health system didn't consider the quality of the professional life of our operators, their salaries, their wages, their well-being, and the quantity of these operators, because Italy has half of the nurses than all other European countries. So we don't have enough skilled operators. But we also realized that another aspect, because, for example, the doctors of the hospital in Bergamo, the day after the pandemic started, they were dealing with a very challenging situation, and they wrote an important article on an international magazine, and they said that the issue was mainly linked to the national health system, and we should have learned that from the pandemic. We have been talking about that for years, and I still remember a document which was dealing with the market and the state approach as a basis of our welfare, and despite being written in the 90s, this article, today nothing has changed yet. So the communitarian dimension on which our project aims at existing should be approached from several different points of view, including the health system, providing more dignity and more space and even more resources to this world focused on the health system. We have the best doctors in the world. They're very highly skilled and specialized, but if we don't succeed in providing them a relationship dimension between the patient and the doctor, but also through all those stages of our life, because as you were saying, from the moment where we are born until the death, we always need this kind of support. And from this point of view, there are lots of initiatives and groups working in this field, and they should be more supported. And let me add something about youth from this point of view, because Maria Flavia Cascelli should have been here with us. Unfortunately, she's ill and she couldn't be here with us. But on her behalf, I would like to say that with AFSIS, we have created a cross-cutting approach and cross-cutting group for young people. We often talk about negative aspects concerning young people, but let me say that there are also many young people that are volunteering, and there are lots of initiatives supported and implemented by young people which should be channeled into a network. Well, I think the meeting in Rimini clearly represents what you're saying. And the last remark, which has already been mentioned earlier, concerns schools and education. Of course, schools shall provide skills and know-how, but it should also provide a civil awareness. We need civic education focusing on the most important aspects of life, and we need also to provide an emotional education, because we know that the issues are arising where there is a lack of this emotional training. The best families are those that are able to create a relationship and exchange, providing to the youth that strength they need and that power they need in order to go ahead in their life. Well, we need to motivate young people on the one hand, but also teachers on the other hand. And that's what you did with the protocol, which has been recently signed at the end of July with the AFSIS and the ministry in terms of sustainability. Sustainability should be taught at school, not only to students, but also to teachers and professors. And this is the missing point that we were looking for. Professor Becchetti, we talked about happiness, we talked about labor, innovation, generations. So now I'd like to ask you, this is kind of a map to lead us through a direction, through a path. So the audience now may be asking that at the end of this meeting, each one will go home, and then what happens? So what's the next step? Can you help us understanding how to take part and participate and contribute in this project? Well, our initiative is successful only if we start a process. So the goal is that after this first step with this tree and the funding words, we need to get some kind of answers on the other side in order to stress the aspect of citizens saying that according to each one experience, each word may have a different meaning. So we aim at creating an interaction. And this interaction should have some clear roots. We don't want to create a social media where people just chat. But we want to create a place, a context where some realities can actually grow. And where can we find that? Well, everything can be found on the website. And maybe it's not clear here, but you can find all these contents on the website of Plan B. So the most important thing is that, again, the goal is happiness. Our goal is to guarantee happiness. We know everything about happiness today. We have millions of figures and data talking about the relationships with happiness. In the past, there were philosophers. Now we have data. And what do these data state? What do they say? Well, the question may be, if we know everything, why aren't we happy? Well, the answer is that being happy is tiring. So the key word to explain happiness, of course, relationship plays an important role, as Chiara was saying, but also the generational approach is very important, because data tell us that we have a meter within ourselves stating that if we are doing something which creates something else, either relationships or improving the life of someone else, if what we are doing creates and can create something else, and I'm thinking also to the environment, the ecology, creating a better world for the next generations, only in that way, creating something for the others, we can be happy. So the worst tragedy in our country, but I would rather say in the world, is the poorness of the sense of the feeling. There are data showing too that there are lots of pills of drugs, sales of opioids sold in villages where there are just a few thousand people living, and anxiety as well it's a very challenging and critical issue. There are young people taking drugs in order to be able to overcome this issue. Let me quote an English sociologist that stated that 40% of the people is aware of doing a job which is useless or dangerous, and that of course creates themselves an issue. So the main goal of our work, of our movement, is to create the conditions for doing something useful. So we need to create the premises on the territory in order to allow people to make their dreams come true. We need to aim at very clear results in terms of policies as well. And it's a bottom-up approach starting from individual initiatives. And then, as Kennedy was saying, we shouldn't wait for the state to do something for us, but we should ask ourselves, what can we do in order to improve our community? Let me make a clear example. Yesterday, I was in the mountain in the north of Italy, in Val di Fiemme, which is a wonderful area. And in that area, since the 12th century, there is the community of Fiemme, where the people living in that area are managing public areas. So this means having an active citizenship and subsidiarity. This is the secret and the proactive aspect of our democracy. That's the only way for our democracy to survive. Thank you very much for your contribution. So we'll now very quickly change our speakers. So before that, we take a picture all together. Okay, very well. Thank you. Round of applause to say goodbye to our speakers. And now I'd like to invite Professor Rosina, Professor Jahier, Professor Rossini, Dr. Subrizi, Professor Farè, Professor Magatti, and Professor Vittadini. A round of applause for our new guests, new speakers.
Allora, partiamo subito. Dando seguito, abbiamo scomposto il gruppo semplicemente per
Okay, so now we have 2 rounds of speakers just for space limits. So we have mentioned basically all the different words. Maybe we didn't talk about Europe, but we'll talk about Europe. Now, let's continue. One of the topics we've talked about is the fact that Italy could disappear. We are afraid of Italy disappearing. There's the problem of the decrease in birth rates. We are well below the replacement rate of the population. In 1966, there were 2.1 children per woman. In 2021, it's 1.25 children per woman. And so this makes us think. Professor Rosina, how did we get there? And what is the solution? As we cannot imagine that Italy and our society will die as was assumed on the other side of the ocean. Italy is undergoing major difficulties because it cannot interpret modern times in a good way, unlike our countries that have taken on modern challenges and have tried to provide solutions to those challenges, unlike Italy did in many other periods of time, like in the post-World War period, where there was the baby boom, where we laid the basis of our welfare state, and we took on the challenge and we laid the basis for a future that was considered positively. Whereas today, the collapse of birth, every year data are worsening. And these very few young people are going away, are going abroad. And this explains that Italy is not working as a country. If there is a decreasing number of young people and an increasing number of people are going away, there's something wrong in this country. So Italy finds it difficult to look at the future. So there are causes and consequences, because there is an unsustainable ratio between the population creating welfare and assets and elderly people. What have the solutions been? The solutions have been ineffective because things have not been improving. Italy is simply changing governments in order to see what happens. So we have centralized governments, center-led governments, technical governments, governments led by different political parties, which are not solving the real problems of our country. No good results have been seen so far. No improvements have been seen so far. Hence, we need to be aware of that, and as in Plan B, we need to be aware of the fact that politics is not just made by political parties. Parties are only on one side, and therefore they are just proposing solutions that maybe are against the solutions proposed by other political parties. There is something that has to go beyond that. Politics has to be considered in a different way. Hence, the interest of polis has to be put at the center. The interest of the common good has to become stronger than the actions and interests of political parties. Measures to increase birth rates have to be shared by everyone. There can be no different positions on the public debate on youth policies. We have to work for the common good of us all. Also, there can be no policy based on the position of different political parties trying to reach consensus for elections, but we have to go beyond that, showing that there is a common good, there are common objectives for the new generations, and that interests that don't have to stop to elections. And then another principle of the Plan B is a participation. Citizens cannot just participate by going to the ballot boxes, and they cannot participate just when they are not satisfied in social networks by insulting, by showing their hatred for what is not happening. There must be something beyond that. Why are we so good at participating in the social networks and then when there is a call to action, we find it difficult to join? Why is that so? We need the civil society to join. We need the civil society to contribute in the political life of this country to be a sort of in-between between the left and the right, to be a sort of in-between between demand and supply in order to improve quality. The left and the right, the demand and supply have to meet. And this is the role of Plan B. B stands for common good, common, shared by everyone. But then we need three things for Plan B to be implemented. First of all, understanding. As in, people need to understand the world they're living in. So they don't have to fight against change, but they have to interpret and to live change. So they have to provide a new meaning to the words. Hence, the use of the words. We have to understand reality in a new way by providing a new meaning to words with new contents. The second thing of Plan B is that we need to communicate. We have to communicate the new words. They have to be made available to everyone. They have to promote dialogue, hence participation. And that has to be communicated to get people together, to build up a new language, a common language, changing things. And then the third point for Plan B is to collaborate. These words have to lead to change and action. And they have to be implemented together with people at a local level and local stakeholders. In short, it is a cultural revolution, looking at changes, promoting guidance to change in order to reach a better future that has to be thought, designed by us all. We don't have to be passive towards the future. If we want to meet our needs in the future, if we want the future to be in line with our desires, we need to provide a direction to the future. And we need to interpret a world that is changing in a common way and according to the local characteristics we find at a local level. So changes have to be implemented at a local level in line with the local needs, and it has to be a bottom-up approach. Because this is the starting point. The main asset is people, the ability, the willingness to do something together. And this is the greatest asset we have. We haven't yet mentioned the word responsibility, which is another wonderful word. So we need to have responsibility in politics. I think you all agree that the issue of migration, not the problem, but the topic of migration has to be tackled in a responsible way, with responsibility. It is not a problem. We don't have to defend from these people coming from elsewhere, but we have to go beyond the logic of emergency, and we have to embrace the logic of a change of major challenges. Mr. Jahier, you know Europe very well, and we live in Europe. But as we were saying, oftentimes it's difficult for me to understand Europe and to see what Europe is doing. It would have never been possible to get vaccinated so early after the beginning of the pandemic if it had not been for Europe. And you all remember that. In some cases, Europe is there. In some cases, Europe is missing. Let me say that the topic of migration has been a topic on which Europe has been losing so far, and it's a challenge for the future. Not only have we not made the steps forward, but we have made steps back. 17, 18 years ago, Franco Frattini was a commissioner for justice. He passed away very recently. And as a commissioner for justice, he prepared a European plan for integration in the field of migration. The contents of that plan were much more advanced than what we have today and the debate we have today in the European Council. We have to go back and to give a new meaning to the words, to give new contents. Otherwise, even when talking about Europe, we are only listening to slogans. So we love Europe when we need vaccines, and then we forget our love for Europe at some other times. Following up to what was said a couple of years ago by Sassoli, Europe is not an incident of history, and it's not just a geographical religion, but it played a fundamental role after the two world wars. This is our starting point. I was born in 1962, and I find it hard to remember that, but Europe started by working on steel and iron. It was based at the beginning on a common agricultural policy, enabling Europe not just to survive with the American aid, but it became one of the major exporters of agricultural produce. Frontiers were broken down. The free movement of people was possible. Today, we no longer need a passport or an identity card to cross borders. Then the single currency. In short, Europe is the best area to be born, to grow, to work, to make children, to be treated, and to die. Is the best possible place in the world, honestly, even compared to other rich areas of the world with a lot of problems. And after the pandemic, we have seen that if Europe took 4 years in the crisis of 2008 to reach the whatever it takes by Mario Draghi to change the policies. It just took 4 weeks after the pandemic to launch measures. And that was possible thanks to the adoption of an uncommon principle in European policies, as in the attention to care. Attention to care was the motto. And it is not by chance that the leaders of that time were mainly women. 4 of them: Macron, Merkel, von der Leyen, and Lagarde. 3 women out of 4. So this attention to care, which already existed, but it was based on vaccines. The Pact of Stability was suspended for a while. You remember when Romano Prodi defined the Stability Pact as stupid? It was suspended. So all the member states could take out debts in order to fight against the pandemic. The European Central Bank issued more than 2,000 billions of purchases on the secondary market to save states. We have issued the first European bond, the SURE. The first European bond was not made for the IT revolution, but to protect workers that no longer had job because of the COVID. And then, after 4 months, the budget of the European Union doubled, which is equal to 2% of the European public expenditure. It's very limited in terms of budget. But it was doubled in July 2020 in order to implement the most extraordinary national recovery plan, which is based on 2 principles and an engine. The 2 principles are the fact that investments were made according to the problems of the countries. It was based on the principle of care. And the second principle was to invest on the future, on tomorrow. This is resilience for the future. And then another principle, the sustainability objectives were doubled. So we came out of the crisis in investing by investing more significantly in the future. As for migration, unfortunately, each country is still defending its own borders, and we forgot what has been happening in the war in Ukraine. Before the 3 million of refugees fleeing Ukraine after the bombs in the first few weeks, for the first time, Europe used a norm that was never used before. In just 1 week, all the member states have approved the implementation of the temporary protection clause, giving work permits, residence permits, and to all these refugees. We didn't do that when there were the problem of Syrians coming out of their country, fleeing their country. Europe is at its best when there is a very strong internal shock. That was the case for the pandemic and for the war in Ukraine, which unfortunately the Ukrainians are still living. This is what the founding fathers said. Europe is done by making giant steps forward at times of big crises. Well, hopefully, we shouldn't have these very strong shocks in order to have the positive results of Europe. Thank you. So you talked about the contribution, Professor Rossini. I give a very trivial example. If I know that I have to contribute to the expenditure of my country and the other ones are doing the same, if this principle is respected and if everyone contributes and participates, we are happy to do it. If not, we're not too happy to do it. So if you don't pay, why should I pay? I mean, this is the principle behind everything, behind the logic. How can we convince people to contribute? What can we do? What can we add for all people to contribute without resorting to sanctions or to repression mechanisms? I know that if I clean the garden in my house and I take care of my garden, the garden is good for me, the garden is good for my neighbors, and I know that the neighbors are also doing the same. So each one of us is taking care of our small parcel of land so that it contributes to the taking care of everyone's land. when creating the Republic, we talk about the fact that each one has to contribute to the state expenditure according to their own capacity. So if each one of us pays its contribution, it's part of its contribution to the expenses, to the state expenditure, this is a common good to everyone. This is an asset for everyone. So there is a rational reason behind it, but this is not enough. There must be a sense of belonging, a stronger sense of belonging, a sort of identification. We have an identity, and identity is a very strong push, but we also need to belong to something. We need to feel that we belong to a great experience, that we belong to an important community that is big. So, if we feel we belong to a place, to a community, to an association, to a brotherhood, to something that keeps us all united, that is connecting us, well, as Chiara was saying, links are fundamental. And so, indeed, I mean, I feel, if I feel that I'm part of something, if I belong to something big, to a big hope, to a big community, my self-consciousness, I'm more conscious of myself. So there is a strong sense of belonging. And we don't have to resort to negative sanctions, which are inevitable. But we have rather to reward the people who contribute. So we should reward the people who contribute so that people are proud of being there, of contributing to the common good. And we see that in the welfare state. Leonardo was making reference to Val di Fassa beforehand. But there are areas where the sense of belonging, where the fact of being proud of belonging to a place, of creating links between the different entities at a local level, all that has created two internal links. Taking care of a place where no one is left behind, where all belongs to the same community. And this has created a welfare based on care, which is not just public, but also private, because all private citizens contribute. I think that contribution is strongly related to participation. What does the B plan do in this sense? So people contribute according to what they can contribute. This is enshrined in the Constitution. And this is the spirit. The idea of contribution is that we can contribute together with the others. How can the B plan contribute to that? Well, the plan B is very practical. I mean, it's not that everything can be solved with rules or through institutions. We have to be able to achieve results. For example, let's talk about poverty. It's not that the problem of poverty is solved by adopting a perfect mechanism, an enlightenment mechanism, because that doesn't work. Because we should think about what has worked and what has not worked so far. If we start from the results and from good practices, and we enhance them and we replicate them, and every year we are brave enough not to change rules, but rather to increase the accountability, the fact of people feeling responsible, so that every year we can learn something new in fighting against poverty. If we could draw examples from good practices, we will find a solution. We made a survey on the topic of poverty, on the issue of poverty, and we understood that when communities share a language in education, in healthcare, in social justice, if communities share languages, practices, competencies, and information, poverty decreases. Okay, this is very clear.
So if everything works, Professor Subrizi, so why do we have to talk about such a radical transformation? There is a project which has been implemented, which is not actually, which is not radically changing everything, because Plan B is collecting what we have good and trying to address it for the future. Why so do we have to talk about radical transformation? What is the idea there? Well, first of all, the idea starts from the youth, because there is no Plan B for Italy without the youth, and we are here for that. But we often talk about doing something for the youth, but not with the young people, with the youth. So there's almost never the space and the possibility to share our own ideas. There's no space for the youth in the decision-making process, and that's something which should be improved, because we need to take part in this kind of actions. And as Pope Francis said, we need to do that in order to implement processes, as we are doing here with an intergenerational dialogue, and that's what Economy of Francesco is doing. Well, Pope Francis also suggests to change this economy, which kills at the roots. So how can we do that? Well, Pope Francis says that we shall start from the integral ecology and social friendship. What is integral ecology? Well, it is going beyond the concept of sustainability that we have been talking about, because there is no sustainability if we don't rely, of course, on the environmental aspect, but also on the social, economic, and human aspect within a social friendship approach. Meaning that we need to have, for all the stakeholders in the society, this kind of approach at the same time. So it's not just a matter of state and market, but we need to involve also the companies and the public institutions, but also the third sector and active citizens. So this should be approached all together. Let me make a clear example. The agri-food sector is very important in Italy. It plays a very important role, and we are dealing with that with Economy of Francesco as well. So we need a radical change also in the agri-food supply chain, because we see what is happening at the European level and what the European Union is doing for that. And we need this kind of approach, this kind of initiative, because there is no sustainability so far at present. There is very little environmental awareness, and when it is the case, there is no fair salary recognized for the workers. So we need to approach all these different aspects at the same time. So young people or little work farmers, for example, can hardly survive thanks to their work, and they need to we need to be able to support the entire supply chain, starting from the workers, involving little farmers, but also consumers play a role, because consumers should have the possibility and the right to choose a product which is good, fair, and clean, as Mr. Petrini was saying, and they should be aware of also the economic sustainability of this initiative, of this action. And let me conclude by saying that we should implement this Plan B with real examples, with real actions, with these principles apply to the economy in different directions, and that's what the economy of Francesco is doing. You mentioned the word thinkers. Well, there is an economic plan behind that, but we cannot stop there. We need to focus on what we already have, and this is also thanks to the youth. And of course, the plan relies on the thinkers, but then we need to put into action involving economies and the social community, implementing and developing policies. Because if politics doesn't consider the good practices that we have in order to transform them into good policies, we will never succeed in achieving a radical transformation. So we need to create a system based on that, and I think that the Plan B should succeed in doing that, should go towards this direction. Well, Professor Farè, we talked a lot, we mentioned several times the adjective human, but we still need to mention the artificial intelligence. So how can we match that? Well, when I went to the high school, my professor told me that intelligence was the ability to solve a problem. Here, artificial intelligence involves something which is not human. So can we have an intelligence which is not human? And talking about Plan B, how can we involve this topic? Well, there is a question that immediately comes to my mind. What is intelligence? Again, what I learned is that it's the ability to solve a problem. Well, here, intelligence means linking, creating a link, a relationship, creating a link between knowledge, the know-how, and what actually happens. So from this point of view, is intelligence only knowledge, or is there something more? The main feature of artificial intelligence is that there is a device which doesn't only provide information, but it's fed by the input and information which are provided. So is it actual intelligence? This is my question. Let me make an example. Let's imagine Newton sleeping under that tree that has an apple falling into his head. And starting from that, he understands that there is a gravity existing. Of course, Newton had a huge know-how and a lot of knowledges. But what made him making this revolutionary knowledge wasn't his knowledge, but the question why this apple fell. Why is that happening? And I believe that the skill and ability to ask the reasons, the whys behind things is a very typically a human phenomenon. And for this reason, I agree with what you were saying, that the words intelligence and artificial cannot be put together. I would rather talk about artificial knowledge, because there is something on the human being that the device cannot replicate. Of course, there is a huge potential also in terms of labor market, for example. It could be helpful. I'm working as a researcher, so of course it can help us to find more rapidly how to analyze the data. But for sure, these machines will never replace my skill to actually read through the phenomenon and to put together the data that I have available. Well, we can say the machine can put the data together, but it cannot ask why, as a human being can do. Professor Magatti, do we still have the possibility to ask ourselves questions which go beyond the promises which are made by the techniques on the one hand, from the science on the other hand? So the dimension of mankind sometimes in our contemporary community and society has been kind of lost. How can we find this dimension again? Well, let me just add a few remarks. First of all, those words on the tree that you can see on the tree, you can find them on the website. You can click on these words, and first of all, we shared these words among ourselves, and we created a shared glossary, a shared vocabulary, which is one of the goals of this work. And then, starting from there, and listening and watching to what has already been repeated several times. Of course, some further words can be added, and starting from there, we will open then the plan of the operational words. For example, justice will lead us to solving and reviewing justice, or other words which can lead to further concepts. And that's the project that through the digital, but also through meetings that I hope that associations and territories will invite us to hold and organize these meetings, we will try to implement and put into action these abstract concepts. This is not just a matter of a digital plan. Let me just add a further thing, a further remark. Do we really need to create this plan B? Well, I think the answer is yes, because as it's been said so far, many of us is not satisfied with what we already have, not only from a political point of view, and not talking about that, but also in terms of economics or in terms of the national health system. It's clear that we are at the end of a cycle and we are not able to start a new cycle. So the goal here, there is no Professor Vittadini that can simply write a beautiful book providing a new theory. This is not possible. This is meaningless. So the new theory, if so we can call it, of the plan B is there, already available, and together we should invent a way to share a theory which is already a practice, because we need a future based on changes, on transformations. So this is a political project. Of course it is. And a political project starts from a movement. And we really hope to become and to be an example which can lead the two different sections, the two different sides of the political parties, because they need and we need to have a point of reference, which is not just simply the center, but it is what keeps together the society, people, and hopes. So this is a political project. And let me exaggerate by saying that we recently celebrated the anniversary of Camaldoli. Well, this is a new Camaldoli because of the people that have been involved. We have here a couple of former ministers, but each one of us represents an important part of a shared heritage. So we worked together, but there is much more behind that. And there is a path in front of us, putting together technology, which is fundamental, and people, which are the actual substance and the roots as well of this plan B and the technique as well. Thank you very much, Professor Magatti, and I'll come back to you later. Well, Professor Vittadini, I was wondering if it was actually the case to leave at the end the topic of education, but you have the honor and the task as well to conclude this morning session. Well, let me say very shortly that we have a new method here with three main points. Well, the new method here is that, well, usually organizations are meeting in order to find compromises and involve the leaders of different organizations, while here, as Mauro said, there is a progressive sharing of contents between people. And this is something, we may say, original, unique, because at the end, we are actually working together, while organizations usually just put some pieces together. And then the second news here is that, well, often, also in Catholic conferences, we find having the bishop or his assistant providing a comment to the gospel, and then there is an analyst who is making an analysis which is like all the others, while here we are people with something in common. We all have our roots in our experiences, but our head is oriented towards the thoughts. So the second method news here is that things are going together with our experiences. Also, our religious and human experience plays a key role in each one of us, and we are all part of the same society. And starting from there, we start thinking and creating something together. And this common method has several points of interest. The first one is the relationship between jobs and education. Yesterday, the president of the Constitutional Court said that work is based on dignity because our republic is based on work. We are a country poor in terms of resources, but very powerful on the basis of work and education because we have lots of skills and education and knowledge and know-how. So education should always be together, we should always be considered together with the labor market, with the work, because we can no longer think of having a technician that knows everything about his job but doesn't have an education, doesn't have a training, doesn't have his own ideas. And then secondly, all the huge strength that we have of this popular strength, the popular force that we can rely on. According to the Article 31 of our Constitution, we can rely on this co-designing, co-projecting. Now we can say that we need more society, more state, more collaboration, because there are so many problems that only together we can face them. And thirdly, this is a political issue. We are a country which is based on three parties, three different parts. So Parliament, of course, is one of these three powers. And this cross-cutting approach is fundamental. And people sharing some common elements will always collaborate. Of course, we need to collaborate for important things, to draft laws or to do something important on the territory. But if we miss this third dimension, it is something that we can no longer accept. It is important that the parliament keeps on playing a central role in our country. So these elements go beyond the Plan B. It's a Plan A+, as the rating agencies are often stating. Thank you, Professor Vittadini, and a round of applause for Professor Vittadini. And let me get back with the last question concerning school and concerning the context from which everything starts. We have some data here which are kind of negative. I read a newspaper stating a few days ago that we have a percentage accounting for 20% of students leaving school. So 2 out of 10, 1 out of 5 students are dropping out. And that's concerning people from 18 to 24 years old. So if the data and the figures are stating that, and this is just a part of the issue, what kind of mistake did we make so far, and how can we correct this mistake? Well, I'm very experienced, and in the past, I remember that with the first Italian Republic, the most, let's say, stupid ministers were named to become minister for schools, and the smartest ones were becoming minister for infrastructures. That was the root of our mistake. We didn't understand that school plays an important role in education as well. There is an international statistics showing that in order to improve the quality in the GDP, the Eastern countries are showing us that you need to invest on education, because education means development. And I'm not talking about quantity of education, but the quality of the education. And we need to avoid inequalities. We need to invest, of course, in infrastructures for the quality of our education. We need to better pay our teachers. This is the engine of the Plan B. The heart of development is this one, is education. This is the most important change that we deserve and we need. And politicians are not understanding that. They believe that this is the last aspect, while it is actually the engine of the development that we are aiming at. Well, the main bridge that may lead us to the change is not the bridge of Messina in Italy, but is the bridge of the education. Thank you, Professor Vittadini. And let me conclude with the statement of the President of the Italian Republic. We need to be brave and the courage of future. We need people with a clear idea in their mind and to show and to lead the way also to those that don't have these ideas. So, Professor Magatti, is that the actual meaning of the Plan B, I believe? So thank you very much for this wonderful session, this wonderful meeting. Let me conclude by saying something that I already mentioned at the very beginning. The meeting in Rimini is a wonderful context, a wonderful place where we share ideas, we collaborate, and that's possible only thanks to the participation of lots of young people. You saw maybe there are some spots around the fair, the Donate Now place, so considering that all these young people are volunteers, please contribute and donate now. Thanks once again for being with us, and I wish you a very good afternoon.
Grazie di cuore a
civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea, innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire, non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.